Look, mano a mano now. Fine, let me finish tonight with Trump. Watch, you won't like this one. This is hardball, where the action is. Welcome back to Hardball. In a series of tweets this morning, President Trump claimed, without any evidence at all, that the estimated death toll in Puerto Rico from Hurricane Maria was being inflated by his political enemies, catch this, in order to undermine him. Trump wrote, quote, 3,000 people did not die in the two hurricanes that hit Puerto Rico. When I left the island after the storm had hit, they had anywhere from 6 to 18 deaths. A long time later, they started to report really large numbers like 3,000. This was made by the Democrats in order to make me look as bad as possible when I was successfully raising billions of dollars to help rebuild Puerto Rico. That's Trump talking and tweeting, rather. In fact, that figure was the result, that figure of almost 3,000 dead, was the result of an independent study. It was commissioned by Puerto Rican officials and estimated nearly 3,000 excess deaths stemming from the hurricane. In other words, people that would normally not have died. In a statement today, Puerto Rico's governor said the victims and the people of Puerto Rico do not deserve to have their pain questioned. In response to the president's tweet, Trump's former co-author Tony Schwartz wrote, when Trump tells a lie, as with the handling of the disastrous Puerto Rico hurricane, the magnitude and repetition of the lie is in direct proportion to how fully he believes he is guilty of the charge being made against him. For more, I'm joined by Tony Schwartz, co-author of The Art of the Deal and CEO of the Energy Project. Also joining us is good for us, Susan Page, Washington Bureau Chief for USA Today. Tony, explain this proportional response. The lie is big enough to cover the embarrassment?
Well, I think what happens to Trump is not so much the embarrassment, but what lies beneath the embarrassment, which is the absolute allergy, and that's a mild word, to any evidence that he is weak or he is wrong or that he has failed. That's intolerable to him. It becomes 100% preoccupying, and he must attack it. And as we know from the thousands of lies he tells and has told, that's the way he does it.
Put him under sodium pentothal, put him in a lie detector, make him tell the truth. Does he know the truth? This is the issue raised by Bob Woodward. One, he says he doesn't have the capacity to tell the truth. And the other is he doesn't have an attachment to reality. So which is it, as you've observed him as a co-author, does he know how to lie, or does he simply lie because he doesn't know the truth?
Chris, he lives on two tracks. One, when he is in a slightly saner state, and it's all relative in his case, he is absolutely capable of consciously and intentionally lying for a particular outcome. When he is aroused, when he's feeling under attack, it happens instinctively, impulsively, and with no forethought. He just does what he has to do. It's a survival mechanism.
Show up in the Oval Office today with sodium pentothal, truth serum, put him into his veins. Will he say 3,000 people were not killed in Puerto Rico during Maria? Will he say that again under the influence of medicine, of medical influence?
Yes.
Why? Because he actually now does believe.
Well, he knows. You know, he knows. I don't think he's that unmoored from reality. I do think in moments of feeling under attack, he loses sight of it. The prefrontal cortex literally shuts down in fight or flight. That happens to him. But I think when the physiology calms back down, yeah, he knows. He knows he's told 6,000 lies. Put him under oath for that, or under sodium pentothal, and he will say that.
Anyway, Trump's tweet this morning was his latest defense of his administration's response to Hurricane Maria. Earlier this week, he called it, quote, an incredible unsung success. His former Homeland Security advisor, Tom Bossert, told the New York Times the missing part was empathy. I wish he'd pause and express that instead of just focusing on the response success. Retired General Russell Honore, who managed the military response to Hurricane Katrina back in 2005 under W, had this advice for President Trump today.
If I was his boss or standing next to him as his chief of staff, I would kick him on the ankle and say, look, focus on the future damn storm. Stop looking in the rearview mirror.
Boy, you know, this is where the divide is, you know? I think LBJ went out and handed out water one time when they had a hurricane down or had bad weather down in Louisiana. W flew over. You know, you only get one shot at this. and Trump is not looking good.
You know, the natural disasters are trouble for politicians because people expect the public officials to be there if there's a hurricane or if there's a riot. And politicians get punished for not showing empathy, for not showing up when people are in trouble. And also, I have a question for you from your previous conversation. Which is worse? Is it worse that President Trump believes what he's saying opposite all the evidence that we have about how many people died in Puerto Rico? Or is it worse if he asserts that and knows it's not true?
Well, let me go back to Tony, because you work with him hand in glove. Let me ask you the one. I know I only have a few things that I think Joe Scarborough says I gnaw on these bones. There's a couple things I do stick to, okay? Like voter suppression drives me crazy. Stupid wars like Iraq drive me crazy because I lived through Vietnam. I think all that, I was around during that. I hate stupidity by politicians when it comes to war because so many people die for their country, but they die and they shouldn't. And when they deny people voting, they're denying America's very quality of who we are. This question, he said Barack Obama, I know he has an African name, Barack Hussein Obama. We know how it was a challenge for him to get elected anywhere to the Senate or the presidency. But why did he keep saying he was born in Kenya when it was impossible to figure out why a white woman from Kansas would go over to Kenya to have the baby there so that she could 35 years later have him actively available for the presidency under the Constitution? It didn't make any logical sense to claim that he was an illegal immigrant, basically, and yet he kept doing it and doing it until he reached a point of diminishing returns and stopped saying it. And just one Friday he said, oh, that's not true. Do you tell me he believed that all those months he was spewing that crap?
No, he didn't believe it.
Why was he doing it? He was lying.
He was lying. He did it because it served his intention or his hope of running for president at the time. And that's why he does it. I mean, that's consistently why he does it. Just want to go back, Chris, to this issue of empathy, because one of the problems here is that Donald Trump doesn't have empathy. And that's not a modest statement. He literally has no empathy. He does not feel emotions like care and
he's a sociopath?
Well, as I've said since 2016 in The New Yorker when he started to run for president, yes, he is a sociopath. There is no question. He's a sociopath, meaning he neither has a conscience nor does he have a heart. Or I should say, because it's more accurate, it's so deeply buried that even he doesn't have access to it, because what he feels is to have any of those feelings, compassion, empathy, is to make him weak and vulnerable. And as I said earlier, that's what's intolerable to him.
You know, you make it sound like Blade Runner when they go to the replicant and they say, what do you feel when you see the bug die? And the replicant knows you've found him out. He doesn't feel anything. Anyway.
He doesn't feel anything. Isn't that terrifying? And isn't that so repugnant in a moment like this? The 3,000 people who died and their families suffering, grieving, in part because he did such a terrible job of taking care of Puerto Rico in the aftermath of that storm. In this case, I believe he has no upside. Okay. I don't think if he does it well, it's going to serve him well. I don't think it's going to be ignored. But if he doesn't do it well, wow, it's one more takedown.
How many electoral votes does Puerto Rico have?
Yeah, exactly. And how many white people compared to brown or black people?
Well, the Washington Post fact checker gave Trump's claim this morning 4 Pinocchios. It's the highest rating for a false or misleading statement, a lie, in other words. Prior to the tweet, the fact checker reported that Trump had already passed 5,000 false claims since becoming president. You know, I watch like you do, and most political reporters and general assignment reporters, we look at the approval rating of the president. And it really has guardrails. It's like mid-30s, around a high mid-40s, somewhere in that range. And it just bounces around there cyclically or seasonally. But these lies don't hurt him any. Why not?
Well, you know, I think his supporters are with him because they're with him because they like his bluster. They like his attitude. They like what he says about trade and about America being cheated and about standing up for a more traditional America. But I do think there's some corrosive effect. And I think you see some of it now. His approval rating now down to maybe 40 or so.
But it seems to have a little ratchet effect there. It doesn't go much lower.
The bottom hasn't fallen out of it. But I do think there is some... And, you know, I think that even though he's been said untruths before, if you look at this one, it seems especially painful because it's about the deaths of Americans. It seems like it's worse than the lie about birth.
I think we've had phrases similar to this, but this Hurricane denier might be his new one.
And
anyway.
it's at the moment as another hurricane's about to hit America.
I know, it's a strange denial. Thank you. I think you've got it figured out. Tony Schwartz, you know him close up. Thank you. Susan Page, great reporter. Thank you. Coming on again. Up next, former Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort, as I said, has reportedly reached a plea deal with the prosecutors. That's with Mueller. What does this mean for Manafort, Trump, and the Mueller investigation? I'm sure Trump's wondering what this means. Is this guy turned? This is Hardball, where the action is. Welcome back to Hardball. Well, there's breaking news in the case against President Trump's former campaign chair, Paul Manafort, who was convicted of 8 criminal counts just last month in Virginia and now faces additional charges here in a court in Washington, D.C. Well, ABC News is reporting just tonight that, quote, Manafort has tentatively agreed to a plea deal with special counsel Robert Mueller that will head off his upcoming trial. That deals with the trial coming up, which was set to take place, as I said, this month. Well, that's according to sources familiar with the negotiations who say, quote, the deal is expected to be announced in court Friday, that's tomorrow, but it remains unclear whether Manafort has agreed to cooperate with prosecutors or is simply conceding to a guilty plea, which would allow him to avoid the stress and expense of trial. Reuters is also reporting that the possible deal is, quote, close but not there yet, and the special counsel's office is declining to comment. Separately, Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani suggested to Politico just last night that he's confident Manafort will not flip on Trump, saying there's no fear that Paul Manafort would cooperate against the president because there's nothing to cooperate about, and we long ago evaluated him as an honorable man. Joining me now is David Corn, Washington bureau chief for Mother Jones and author of Russian Roulette, a great book out there, this whole question of the Russia investigation. Paul Butler's a former U.S. attorney. I go directly to Mr. Butler. What does it mean to you when you hear this? It means that Manafort is asking himself whether he gets a better deal from Donald Trump or Robert Mueller. If it's Donald Trump, that means that he's confident that Trump will pardon him, and then he pleads guilty in order to avoid the expense of a trial, a second trial, which would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, in addition to the hundreds of thousands of dollars that he owes for the first trial. The other possibility is that he decides that he can't count on Donald Trump for anything, including a pardon. And so he makes a deal with Mueller. But Mueller says, what you got? Mueller isn't going to be willing to make a deal with Manafort unless Manafort can give him the goods on Donald Trump. They've been spending here up to 5 hours now negotiating this. Is that what they're negotiating, what you got? Yeah, I think so. Again, Mueller says something has to be in it for me. I know I have a strong case. We already convicted you of 8 felonies in Virginia. This is actually an easier case in D.C. because it's about failure to register as a lobbyist. You either did or you didn't. Mueller's saying you can go to jail for another 10 years or you can help us make our case. And he could give him a break on the sentences he's already gotten, on the charges already he's found guilty of in Virginia. Yeah, that's his case too. Yeah, so the prosecutors can make a recommendation. Bundle of, thank you. Yeah. You're reporting. What's Manafort know about Trump? Can you tell from your reporting, David?
Well, there are a couple of areas. I mean, he may know about stuff prior to the campaign, but during the campaign, remember this guy named George Papadopoulos? Sure. George Papadopoulos says that it was Trump who okayed him reaching out to the Russians while the Russians were attacking the Democratic Party and attacking the election. And in one of the earlier filings in the case, it says that Manafort knew about that. So Manafort also sat in on the Trump Tower meeting, in which there was, if not collusion, an attempt to collude between Manafort, Jared Kushner, Donald Trump Jr., and a Russian emissary from the Kremlin. There's also a case of Donald Trump Jr. lying, putting out a statement about that meeting that Donald Trump now admits he dictated. This could be an obstruction of justice issue that Manafort might know something about.
What do you think of this, Paul? There's a lot of stuff. It affects the family. It affects the president. He could incriminate them all, potentially.
He could. So the question is how trustworthy he is, not as a witness. He's never going to show up in a federal courtrum, even for
if you grab him,
as a witness. But in terms of what information he has, again, the way it works is his lawyers, Manafort's lawyers, make a proffer. They say this is what we would tell
Why are you
you.
taking a
This is
picture of
what
my
we would
dress?
testify to the grand jury if you give us a deal. And Mueller evaluates that and then decides whether there's enough in it for his side, for the special counsel, to go forward.
Well, Politico
got an
is
inverted
also
picture?
reporting that attorneys for Paul
So
Manafort have
these,
been in touch with the president's legal team. That's
Well,
according
you
to
just
Rudy
set this
Giuliani,
someplace and
who
it
quote,
shows that.
confirmed
Well,
that Trump's
this
lawyers
is,
and Manafort's have been in regular contact, and they are part of a joint defense agreement that
There's
allows
like a
confidential
selfie
information to be
like, I
shared
think if
between
you
them.
buy it,
Well,
there's
Giuliani
a-
confirmed he spoke with
like a
Manafort's lead
selfie
defense
timer.
attorney shortly
Looks
before and
good.
after the verdicts were returned in that Virginia trial a few weeks ago, but the former mayor wouldn't say what he discussed with the Manafort team. Back to you, Paul.
Once again, we see the Trump defense strategy out of the mob playbook. So you see these joint defense agreements in organized crime cases and street gang cases.
Yeah, I
and what they
figured it out
allow
myself.
lawyers to do is to coordinate so that all of everything that's said is protected by attorney-client privilege. What they
They're really
also
making a
allow,
mess
though,
out of
is
this
for the
guy's story.
defendants to get their story straight, to make sure that everybody's on the same page. The other significance of this is it means that Trump understands that his interests are allied with Manafort, which I think makes a pardon even more likely.
But it's collusion. This is, I mean, this is a separate
You mean
form of
legal collusion?
Well, no, legal collusion between Paul Manafort and Donald Trump. And correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, but in very few of these cases does one of the possible defendants have the ability to pardon the other defendant.
right.
You're being sarcastic.
I am being sarcastic.
I have a theory, by the way.
so-
I'm not a lawyer. I say, admit it, Paul. You're the expert. I get the feeling that somewhere down the line in 19, that would be next year, when he has to decide whether to run for election or not, the big question before the president is, are you going to protect your family with pardons and kill the chance of getting reelected or not?
Yes.
And you're going to make that decision. Thank you, David Corn. Thank you, Paul Butler. Up next, Hurricane Florence is coming ashore with bands of drenching rain and powerful winds, 11-foot seawalls coming in. We're going to check in with that with Al Roker. He's going to be on in just a minute. You're watching Hardball. Welcome back to Hardball. We're keeping a close eye, of course, on Hurricane Florence down in the Carolinas. It begins to hit any moment now, the East Coast down there. Joining right now is Al Roker of NBC. Thank you. Al, the great thing about this, the only good thing about this storm is we get to have you on Hardball, but thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's always good to see you, Chris. And we are seeing those bands of rain coming in, and the winds are picking up. These are some buoys just offshore, 112-mile-per-hour wind gust. Wilmington, 47-mile-per-hour wind gust. Cape Hatteras, 54 miles per hour. And here's the latest from the National Hurricane Center. We expect an update coming up in about the next 15 minutes. But in the meantime, it's a Category 2 storm, 85 miles east-southeast of Wilmington, 100-mile-per-hour winds. It's moving west-northwest at 5 miles per hour. Here's the track as we see it now. About 8 a.m., I should say, Friday, it comes on shore right across Wilmington and then continues just to the north of Myrtle Beach, makes a bit of a right turn and heads up into Tennessee, on into West Virginia, Ohio, eventually into Pennsylvania. It'll be even raining here in the Northeast later on, early next week. But in the meantime, these are the extremes. Peak wind gusts of over 100 miles per hour. Significant wind damage is expected. And with that, there are going to be massive power outages. Up to 3 million people without power throughout the Southeast. The greatest storm surge threat is about 7 to 11 feet. That's in Wrightsville Beach, anywhere to the east and west of there. High tides around 11:13 tonight to around 11:47. And then tomorrow morning, we've got another high tide from 11:30 till about 12 noon. So that's going to be really the peak time. 7 to 11-foot surge. The sweet spot is from Cape Fear to Cape Lookout. And rainfall, Chris, we're talking generally from Myrtle Beach on up to about Cape Hatteras. We're looking at anywhere from 10 to 20 inches of rain, but could see isolated totals of 40-inch, unprecedented rain totals, and a flood threat until next week. But the big problem, Chris, going to be the storm surge. That's where 50% of people in hurricanes lose their lives.
You know, is this sort of normal? I mean, you and I grew up with, the hurricane season. This is the hurricane season. It's that part of the country. It seems very familiar to me. Is this unusually harsh weather?
Well, look. it started out as it's been a Category 4. It's down now to a 2. But, you know, we're seeing these supercharged storms all of a sudden become hurricanes as we are dealing with climate change, as we're dealing with sea level rise. All of a sudden, areas like the Southeast especially are very vulnerable to this kind of storm.
Boy, it just reminds me of Pat Conroy, Prince of Tides. That's the part of the country. Thank you so much, It's great to meet you again. Thank you for this. I mean, to see you again. I see you a lot. Anyway,
nice meeting you too, Chris.
Up next, President Trump. You're the celebrity. I'm a little nervous. Anyway, he's not exactly known as a paragon of truth-telling, that man right there. But his latest fabrication is generating outrage from all points of the compass. Trump, 5,000 cases of lies since taking office.
I can hear him, too.
We'll be right back with that.
How do you fly? You jump.
Welcome back to Harbor. Earlier today, President Trump dismissed the death toll in Puerto Rico as a Democratic attack to make him look bad. It's yet another example, I think, of the president's embrace of conspiracy theories. Let's watch.
Our current president came out of nowhere. In fact, I'll go a step further. The people that went to school with him, they don't even know, they never saw him. They don't know who he is. Crazy. I watched when the World Trade Center came tumbling down. And I watched in Jersey City, New Jersey, where thousands and thousands of people were cheering as that building was coming down.
His father was with Lee Harvey Oswald prior to Oswald being shot. I mean, the whole thing is ridiculous. What is this right prior to his being shot? And nobody even brings it up.
When you look at the people that are registered, dead, illegal, and 2 states, and some cases maybe 3 states, we have a lot to look into.
For more, I'm joined by the Harbor Roundtable today. Anita Kumar, a McClatchy White House correspondent, a Clarence Page Chicago Tribune columnist, Shannon Pettypiece Bloomberg News White House reporter. Great cast of smart people. Why does Trump say things he knows aren't true?
He just gets upset about it, right? I mean, the thing that struck me about so many of these things are they're government findings, right? It's the government who says Russia interfered.
But don't you mean the deep state? The deep state.
He runs the government, so he doesn't trust his own people and the findings that they figure out.
This spooky thing, Clarence, where nobody knew him at school, that goes beyond birtherism. That suggests he's one of these Ivy League plots where the kids got together with extra money and created a phantom person. No one really did go to Columbia. No one really did go to Harvard Law. Right. They didn't go to school in Hawaii. He didn't exist. What's the point he's making there? And all those people cheering.
Oh, well, this really underscores how there's this mysterious guy came out of nowhere. And, oh, yeah, he happens to be black.
That part they knew.
Somebody in Africa conspired in the late 50s saying, we're going to get a black man elected in 2008. I mean, this whole thing is so ridiculous.
Barack Hussein Obama to make it work.
Well, remember, when Trump first announced his candidacy, he immediately launches into conspiracy talk about immigration, about Obama, etc. And he got applause for it from a set of voters who turned out for him. That's his base. And that's all he wants. He doesn't reach beyond it, and his approval numbers show it. He's just, this is how he became a minority president, ironically enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes beyond just, this Puerto Rico tweet goes beyond conspiracy theory.
Hurricane denial.
It also goes to this idea of branding, and he is never wrong. And if you talk to people who worked with him in New York in his business days, I mean, he was known for hyperbole, for exaggeration, for saying, I'm the biggest real estate developer in New York. I have the best buildings. And in business, you can do that. That's just part of the way things are in marketing, especially in the world of real estate. In politics, in government, you can't. And it also gets to another point, a theme of his life is he is never wrong. He has never made a mistake. He will never admit defeat. He will never apologize. And so saying that there's a problem in Puerto Rico fits in this pattern.
Let me try something. There's a real world that he knows. He knows the underworld of New York. He knows, for example, what it takes to get a project moving in New York. You got to pay off councilmanic privilege or whatever you have to pay off the councilman or woman. You have to pay off the mob, the unions. He knows reality when it comes to making money. So he is not divorced from understanding the universe he lives in. Why does that part of the world matter to him? And he understands it, but he doesn't seem to understand anything that might be used against him. He doesn't understand it.
I mean, it's true. I mean,
so he's lying.
It is the difference, I think, though, between where he came from and what he's doing now. Here's the thing that he hurts himself, right? He has talked repeatedly in the last year about how the mayor or the governor of Puerto Rico has been supportive, and he has. He said all these things about how the administration did all the right things. Today, the governor came out and said that the president was wrong. So here was an ally, and now he's lost him, right? Paul Ryan.
They don't have any electoral votes out there.
Well,
wait till this storm gets to Pennsylvania.
Well, you know what? They do have electoral votes in Florida. They do have electoral votes in Florida. And where's everyone from Puerto Rico going? They're moving to Florida.
8% of the population declined in Puerto Rico. A lot of it moved to Florida.
Where did they go?
The man who, the governor of Florida, Rick Scott, who said he was wrong, but also the man he supports, Ron DeSantis, he's supporting him so much in Florida, the Republican. He also said he's wrong.
Well, former President Barack Obama is about to headline an Ohio rally for Richard Cordray. He's the former official in Obama's administration who's running for governor of Ohio. Obama's return to the campaign trail sets up a proxy battle, of course, with President Trump, who's planned an aggressive campaign schedule himself for the midterms. What are you going to, Clarence? This is mano a mano. Is this good for Obama?
Well, this also, by the way, Ohio's my home state, so I'm pretty close to the situation there.
Where'd you grow up?
In Middletown, home of Hillbilly Elegy, the J.D. Vance book. He went to the same high school I did, but 30 years later. And his Middletown is devastated. I mean, you just had a Frontline special this week about Dayton and what's happened with deindustrialization, post-NAFTA, et cetera. Ohio's always been a swing state, an essential state for Republicans. Obama won it twice because he was very well aware of the demographics of industry in Ohio, and that's how he beat Mitt Romney at that time.
Is he smart to get into a street fight with Trump?
Sorry?
Is he smart to get into a street fight with Trump?
Yeah, some people say, you know, well, maybe he's just going to agitate more Trump supporters. But the fact is, people who are going to vote for Trump already know it. And the swing voters are what people should be going for now.
We should get that head over there.
That he can reach those folks. He's done it before, but he's always had short coattails. So this is partly a test now to see if he can help Cordray to win in that state. It's a tight race.
The independent voters down in Florida are heavily for Bill Nelson. It's fascinating stuff. Go ahead. Tell me about Ohio.
Oh, no, I was just going to say about Obama, I mean, like it or not, he's still the head of the party, right? I mean, there's 20 people that are going to, Democrats that are going to run for president against President Trump, but there's no one defining person. It's still Barack Obama. And honestly, it's surprising that he hasn't done this yet. This last 18 months that he didn't get involved when...
Can he do this when Trump attacks? Remember that thing he used to do?
Yeah, I think he can. I mean, I know there's this theory out there that Trump's strongest when he has someone to punch back against, and putting Obama out there gives him another person to do that with.
Obama's the reason he ran,
Trump has had 8 years to discredit and punch at Obama, and they haven't been successful. So Trump hasn't really found a way to drag down Obama the way he does other contestants.
Well, it's going to get personal. You can bet. Thank you, Anita Kumar. Thank you, and Clarence Page, and thank you, Shannon Pennypiece. When we return, let me finish that with Trump Watch. Not one of his favorites coming up tonight. You're watching Hardball.
Oh, like thousands of bits. So, but we weren't really hacking. We were just doing the kitty over and over again. We were playing within the rules which you would set in the game. There we were.
Welcome back. The other big story tonight, ABC News reporting, and this is for the first time, former Trump campaign chair Paul Manafort has reached a plea with special counsel Bob Mueller. As I mentioned, NBC News has not confirmed this report yet. It's all unfolding right now, and I'm joined by Senator Richard Blumenthal, a Democrat from Connecticut, a former prosecutor who serves on the pivotal Judiciary Committee relevant to this and the Judge Kavanaugh news, which we're going to get to in a few minutes. First, your reaction to these reports, which would have been shocking if you think about this a year or two ago. A campaign chair having been convicted, now cutting a deal. Your reaction?
It would have been shocking just a year ago. Remember that Paul Manafort was, in effect, tampering with witnesses. His apartment was raided by the FBI because there was the prospect of his destroying documents. Now there is the potential for his cooperation, which in my hope, at any rate, would be involved in any kind of plea agreement. A trial often serves a public education function. And so the public really needs and deserves some public airing of what he did and why he did it. And the special counsel would be well served by his cooperation, because he knows a lot about Russia collusion as alleged against the President of the United States.
Well, Senator, on that point, the Cohen plea process involved a brief but rather frank assessment of someone very close to Donald Trump, explaining in his own words how he committed crimes with Donald Trump. Although, as you know, the question of what else the feds are going to do with the bigger part of that is open. Do you think it would be a good thing, then, if Paul Manafort does confess to some of whatever it is that's in this plea agreement tomorrow in open court? Or are you concerned that this is all a bid by Manafort, who we learned today is in an active defense agreement with Donald Trump, to not have what you called the public education function of that larger trial? This was going to be the more Russia-related trial.
We'll see what happens in the actual plea agreement, but obviously if it involves some reference and substantiation to the claim that the president is an unindicted co-conspirator, that he's implicated in serious wrongdoing that goes to the legitimacy of his president, it will be further strong evidence and support for the special counsel at a time when the president is increasingly overt in his desire to shut down that investigation. His sycophants and surrogates in Congress are threatening both the special counsel and the attorney general, and the prospect of the attorney general losing his job is a further threat to the special counsel. So anything that supports the special counsel's investigation is to be welcomed.
I want to broaden out to thinking about this with President Trump and, of course, the midterm elections that are hanging over all of this, because Michael Moore, who, of course, is a noted critic of the president, was on with my colleague Chris Hayes last night. And one of the points he made that's even broader than the so-called witch hunt attack on this is whether the current occupant of the Oval Office has the requisite respect for the rule of law as a foundation of American democracy? Or does he have a different mindset, culled from business or something even more pseudo-authoritarian, that doesn't really care about that? I'm curious at that broader level, given how much you work on these issues, what you think. Take a listen to how Michael Moore put it.
I think that we have someone in the White House who has no respect for the rule of law, who dislikes democracy by an incredible degree, which doesn't make him really that much different from other billionaires or CEOs, because their businesses are not democracies. They rule by fiat, they decide, they make the calls, and they don't like having anybody else having a say.
Senator?
Comparing Donald Trump to the normal CEO, I think, is an insult to the American business community, because my hope is that the ordinary CEO has more respect for the rule of law than Donald Trump. In fact, he has nothing but contempt for the American judiciary, for the rule of law, and for the principles of democracy that are so threatened because of his chaotic and erratic administration. And I asked Judge Kavanaugh directly about these attacks on the American judiciary in the confirmation hearings. I was deeply and gravely disappointed by Judge Kavanaugh's failure to denounce and condemn these attacks on the independent judiciary. And when the history of this era is written, Harry, I believe the heroes will be our independent judiciary and our free press, who have done so much to defend our democracy despite the continuing contempt for the rule of law demonstrated by our president.
Well, and I think we have that, and that's the other big story. There are these written questions that are part of the process right now. He was asked, in addition to what happened in the hearings, as you mentioned, he was asked in the new round of written questions, do you believe the investigation that is currently being overseen as special counsel is a, quote, witch hunt? And Judge Kavanaugh writes back, this was in response to your side's questioning, well, sitting judges and nominees should refrain from commenting on current events and political controversies. Senator, do you think that he is being deliberately daft or cagey there?
He's being evasive. He was evasive in the hearing. In fact, he was seemingly misleading, and that's why today in the Judiciary Committee meeting, I moved to adjourn that meeting so that we could get the documents. Time and information are absolutely necessary. Unfortunately, so disappointingly, my Republican colleagues are rushing to judgment and regarding this responsibility as a rubber stamp, not the real advice and consent that we need. And those evasive and seemingly misleading responses from Judge Kavanaugh make all the more necessary that we have access to the millions of pages of documents that have been concealed and hidden. Put aside the committee confidential issue. There are millions of pages of documents from his service as staff secretary to President Bush that are directly relevant to the most instructive period of his professional life. That's
well, and on that, Senator, and the question of transparency, as you know, your colleague making waves today, Senator Dianne Feinstein, said publicly she's got information from an individual that she thinks is relevant to the nomination, but she sent it to the federal authorities. Now, she's not elaborating at all on the nature of this, and as we do around here, I have to mention NBC News hasn't confirmed anything about the details of what might be in that secret complaint. The White House is pushing back, and I want to give their side. They say this is an 11th-hour attempt to delay Kavanaugh's confirmation. Now, you were successful in delaying today's vote by a week out of the committee. Do you have anything to add to Senator Feinstein's rather opaque statement?
All I can say is that Senator Feinstein received information from an individual who strongly requested confidentiality and declined to come forward. She honored that request and nonetheless referred it to federal investigative agencies, specifically the FBI, for investigation. But
Senator, do you know, did the Democratic side of the committee or Senator Feinstein receive that while there was still time to raise it in the hearings?
What I can tell you is that Senator Feinstein respected the request for confidentiality. I learned about it literally last night, and we have appropriately, she has done so, referred it to investigation.
What about the White House concern, though, that it does seem late that the judge isn't getting an opportunity to address this in the hearings where that type of vetting is supposed to occur?
I think we need more information in documents on issues apart from this one, wholly separate from the information that Senator Feinstein received from that individual. And we ought to have another hearing.
Fair enough.
The judge ought to come forward to answer the questions that are outstanding.
Fair enough. And I want to get you as well on the other big issue. We've covered a lot of ground, and I appreciate you being generous with your time. Before I let you go, Roe v. Wade continues to hang over this nominee and why he worked for a pro-life administration in a political legal capacity in the Bush administration before he was a judge, Federalist Society, pro-life credentials, which many people would say, okay, fine, then be honest about it. But there is an increasing view that under the questioning of you and your colleagues, he effectively tried to hide that. I want to play for you Bill Press, who I'm sure you know, a journalist who's covered 5 different confirmation hearings. Here's how he put it on the beat regarding Kavanaugh's statements to your committee under oath about Roe. Take a look.
He lied. I think he dissembled. He lied all the way through it. I mean, look, let's face it. Let's just be honest. He is an anti-Roe v. Wade vote, and he will be on the Supreme Court. I think we know that. 5 justices can overturn any settled law, and he would be a 5th vote.
Final question, your reaction. Did Judge Kavanaugh lie, and is he anti-Roe v. Wade?
He was certainly seemingly misleading in his answers and clearly vague and evasive, ambiguous in response to my questions about a memo that he wrote which said that Roe v. Wade can be overturned. Those are his words, and also said there are justices on the Supreme Court who would vote to overturn. He potentially is the 5th vote to overturn, or at least chip away at Roe v. Wade in a way that undermines that long-established precedent and undercuts women's health care and reproductive rights. I hope that my colleagues will do more than simply rubber stamp this nomination.
Senator Richard Blumenthal from the Judiciary Committee on a busy night. Thank you for being with us as part of our coverage of those stories. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.